Survival in the wilderness was absolute. Succeed in the hunt, or face starvation. Imagine a ton of bison charging, your horse exhausted, breath failing. A single shot meant everything. A miss meant being overrun. This brutal reality defined life. Each hunt was a matter of life and death. Certain animals sustained the frontier populace, while others fiercely resisted. Which species proved most vital? And how did frontiersmen hone their skills to dominate this unforgiving challenge? We'll begin with a creature fundamental to the frontier's very existence and development. Number 1. Beaver. On the beaver frontier, the animal's fur served as currency. This trade powered economies and molded the individuals involved. By the early 1800s, owning a trap could support a wilderness livelihood. French traders, the coureurs des bois, or runners of the woods, ventured deep into indigenous territories, bartering for furs. Many adopted native lifestyles and intermarried. But they weren't legally sanctioned. The French crown controlled licenses, and corruption was rife. Many defied regulations, living precariously outside both society and law. Eventually, trade shifted to direct trapping. Men no longer waited for furs, they took them. Equipped with steel traps, they placed them in frigid waterways. A bait stick scented with castoreum, the beaver's musk, lured them. A misstep activated the trap. Driven by instinct to deeper water, the chain and weight ensured a quick drowning. Trappers stretched hides on willow frames, dried them, then shipped them east. St. Louis became the fur trade epicenter, a place of rising and falling fortunes. European demand for beaver hats transformed the frontier into a contest of bravery and ambition. Mountain men faced daily hardship, freezing rivers, hostile tribes, competitors. One error, like slipping on ice, misjudging a bear, or entering the wrong camp, was fatal. Yet for survivors, the wilderness was home, a life they wouldn't trade. Running trap lines was arduous. Trappers covered miles over rough terrain, battling snow and swollen rivers to check traps. Skinning demanded precision. A mistake reduced pelt value. Each successful hide meant continued survival. Annually, mountain men gathered at the rendezvous, where furs were exchanged for powder, lead, and supplies. These chaotic remote valley assemblies were essential supply lines. In 1832, Pierre's Hole hosted trappers, traders, and Native Americans exchanging goods, narratives, and expertise. Alliances formed, and frontier customs were shared. Survival often relied on relationships with native tribes. Some interactions were violent, others led to commerce, shared skills, and bonds. Trading posts like Fort Union, 1828, offered crucial refuge, places to rest, rearm, and reconnect. Fortunes hinged on pelts. In the 1830s, a single beaver skin could bring gold. Trappers earned $4–6 per pound. A skilled, lucky season yielded 400–500 lbs, meaning $1,600–$3,000, a fortune for a self-sufficient man. But prosperity faded. By 1840, beavers were nearly gone from overhunting. Traps came up empty, prices plummeted. Pelts once worth $4+ barely fetched $1 or $2. A trapper lucky to get 150 lbs earned only $350–$500, scarcely worth the danger. The wilderness always extracted a cost. In today's terms, a top season might have earned $48–72 per pound, totaling $19,236,000 annually. But by the time rivers were depleted, even the best trapper made only a few thousand. Thus, the beaver trade exacted its price. Relentless trapping depleted river populations, driving trappers into unexplored territory. Wetlands vanished, water systems altered, nature suffered the consequences. By the industry's collapse, The beaver's ecological impact was clear. The frontier always seized what it required, but nature invariably demanded payment. As the rivers yielded less wealth, a different valuable prize roamed the deep woods. It was feathered, swift, and equally important for survival. Number 2. Wild turkey. Wild turkeys were large, common, and easy to track. These birds kept frontiersmen alive during lean times. A single kill could provide a feast, and their feathers and bones had multiple uses beyond food. Using dogs simplified the process. A good turkey dog would scatter the birds, sending them airborne in every direction. Then the hunter would recall the dog, imitating the sound of a lost turkey. Confused, the birds returned, believing safety was near. Instead, they encountered a waiting rifle. Regarding firearms, the long rifle, known as Kentucky or Pennsylvania, was a favored choice, renowned for its accuracy. However, some preferred smoothbore fowling pieces, early shotguns allowing them to fire scattered shot into a flock. One successful blast could down several birds. Some hunters bypassed firearms entirely, constructing traps using logs, branches, whatever materials were available, to guide turkeys into confined spaces. The birds would enter but couldn't escape. Seasonal timing influenced strategy. Fall meant large flocks, easier to locate and ambush. Spring was mating season, when male gobblers became vocal and less cautious. Hunters would mimic hen calls, drawing the toms directly into killing range. Stealth was paramount, avoiding sudden movements or bright clothing. A careless step could mean going hungry. Experienced hunters passed down these skills, mentoring the next generation in patience, precision, and taking the shot at the critical moment. By the 1900s, excessive hunting and habitat destruction nearly eradicated wild turkeys. The frontier era was over, and so too were the birds. But conservation efforts facilitated their return, demonstrating that even when wildness recedes, some part of it can be restored. Yet, for hunters prepared to pursue larger game, the mountainous terrain offered a quarry well worth the danger. Number 3. Elk provided meat for meals, hides for warmth, and bones for implements. Bringing one down was challenging, demanding patience, skill, and deep knowledge of the territory. Frontiersmen employed various tactics. One was the timber sneak, moving slowly and silently through dense woods, rifle ready. Elk could appear instantly. Hunters often crept among trees, constantly observing. If they spotted a bedded elk, they'd stop, wait for it to rise, then fire. Another method was the ambush. Elk followed predictable paths, the same trails, ridges, and water sources. An astute hunter identified these bottlenecks, positioned themselves, and waited for the elk to approach. No unnecessary motion, no wasted shots, just quiet patience and careful aiming. During the rut, bull elk became agitated. Hunters would lure them in by imitating elk sounds using bugles and cow calls. Some bulls would charge, ready for a confrontation. A precisely timed call could draw one within range. Occasionally, interrupting a bull mid-bugle with an aggressive advance was enough to provoke a charge. Wind was critical. Elk possessed an acute sense of smell. Being detected upwind ended the hunt before it began. Prudent hunters approached from downwind, utilized the landscape, and stayed low to avoid being seen by the herd. Locating elk wasn't sufficient. Knowing when to act was key. Rushing in too soon might frighten them. If the herd was feeding and settled, a hunter would make their move. If they were moving, he'd hold back, watch, and await the opportune moment. This might mean waiting a full day, or even longer. But patience ensured food for the fire and ample winter provisions. When it was time to move, Hunters had to be swift. Elk covered ground rapidly. Failing to keep pace meant losing the chance. This is why elk hunting demanded stamina. Many hunters spot elk but never managed to reach them. The mountains naturally eliminated the less capable. Now, ambush hunting requires a unique kind of patience. Elk aren't static. They traverse miles of grazing areas, distant waterholes, and move unpredictably. A preferred slope might host elk only a few times monthly, not weekly. Knowing where and how long to wait distinguishes a successful hunter from one who returns empty-handed. The two primary ambush locations are travel routes and escape routes. Travel routes follow established paths, ridgelines, saddles, and migration corridors. Escape routes are the paths elk use when startled. Understanding the terrain and elk behavior allows you to intercept them before they realize you're there. When large game proved difficult to find, the frontiersman's next meal was often readily available. Number 4. Rabbit. Few creatures sustained frontiersmen as reliably as the rabbit. It was small, quick, and found almost everywhere. Rabbits offered a meal achievable with a well-aimed shot, a snare, or simply patient observation. On the frontier, food supply was uncertain. You consumed whatever you could procure, and rabbits were ubiquitous. They bred rapidly, were easy to trap, and provided just enough meat to sustain a person. Long hunters depended on them. Spending up to half a year in the wild required a consistent food source. While deer and buffalo were valuable, they weren't always present. Rabbits, however, were dependable. A frontiersman could trap them, shoot them, or even use a club if they got close enough. The meat provided nourishment, and the fur offered warmth. Nothing was discarded. Often hunting them demanded patience. Rabbits were most active during the early morning and late evening hours. This was when the hunter moved cautiously, his eyes scanning the brush for the subtle form of a hidden rabbit. Sudden movements startled them, but moving steadily, acting as if unseen, caused them to freeze, trusting their natural concealment. Get near enough, take the shot, and dinner was secured. Once caught, the rabbit needed rapid cleaning. Meat spoiled quickly in the wilderness. The hide was stretched and air-dried for insulation or trade. Even the bones served purposes, as tools or needles, anything to maximize limited resources. However, the pursuit didn't end with rabbits. It extended upward into the foliage. Number 5. Squirrel. Given that survival in the dense forests of early America often required eating whatever prey was available, squirrels frequently appeared on the menu. Like rabbits, they were small, quick, and abundant, providing a consistent source of protein for settlers and hunters who couldn't afford to be selective. Locating squirrels wasn't difficult. They were always present, chattering in trees, scurrying along branches. The challenge lay in getting them in your sights. Frontiersmen typically used small-caliber rifles, often a .22, aiming for headshots to preserve the meat. Shotguns were also effective, especially when dense leaves obscured clear rifle opportunities. Hunting squirrels demanded significant patience. A frontiersman needed to understand their habits. In colder months, they slept later. Waking early to hunt was unproductive. It was better to wait until the sun warmed the upper branches. The most skilled hunters employed sound to attract them. Mimicking distress calls could draw curious squirrels into view. At first light, a hunter would find a tree, remain still, and wait. The woods would gradually awaken, faint rustling of leaves, snapping twigs. With enough quiet observation, a squirrel would reveal its presence. One precise shot secured breakfast. Squirrel hunting wasn't limited to the morning. Evenings were also productive. Midday hunts occurred when necessary. The approach remained consistent. Find a suitable spot, sit quietly, and allow the environment to settle. Animals forget your presence given time. Listening was more important than looking. Squirrels were noisy when moving, branches swaying, leaves rustling, the distinct sound of nutshells dropping. Hearing them feed indicated where to aim. When relocating, move slowly. If squirrels were spotted far off, use large trees for concealment. Stay hidden until you are within range. If no activity was apparent, head towards trees bearing nuts, oaks, hickories, or any dropping food. Field edges and ridgetops were reliable locations. Also, scan the treetops for motion, a flick of a tail, shaking leaves. Some squirrels would freeze, hoping you'd pass by. These were easy targets. An easy squirrel tasted just as good as a difficult one. Remember that seasons alter the hunt. Early autumn with thick foliage meant hunting by sound, listening for nut activity and branch rustling. Late fall and winter with bare trees made squirrels more visible, but also made you easier to spot. Remaining quiet, utilizing cover, and taking deliberate shots determined success. Once caught, a squirrel became supper, prepared as stew, fried, roasted over coals, or added to soups with available vegetables. It provided essential energy, sustaining men through demanding days. Squirrel hunting evolved into a skill, passed down through generations. Some places still honor it. Arkansas hosts a World Championship squirrel cook-off. Old traditions endure, so the land provided what it could. But when the trees were silent, a smart person turned to the water. Number 6. Fish. When other game animals were scarce, fish were crucial for frontiersmen's survival. Rivers, lakes, and smaller streams offered a consistent food source, though catching them required skill, perseverance, and sometimes sheer courage. The most straightforward method? Fishing by hand, known as noodling. This involved wading into the water, feeling under submerged rocks and logs, and grasping fish directly. Catfish were preferred targets, nesting deeply in muddy areas and debris. However, reaching into unseen spaces carried risks: sharp fin spines, aggressive snapping turtles, and even venomous snakes. For a more dependable catch, frontiersmen used gorge hooks, a sharpened piece of bone, wood, or thorn, tied at its center to a line and baited. When a fish swallowed it, the hook would turn sideways, lodging in its throat. No manufactured metal hooks were necessary, just clever improvisation for survival. Spearfishing, however, demanded patience and swift action. Armed with a sharpened pole, sometimes tipped with bone or iron, men would wait along riverbanks or on low-hanging tree branches. Water's refraction made aiming challenging, but experience taught them how to compensate. For larger quantities, frontiersmen constructed fish traps, barriers of stone or wood shaped like a V, designed to guide fish into a contained area. Once built, these traps worked unsupervised while the men hunted, cut wood, or managed campfires. It was a passive, efficient, and time-saving technique. Nets represented another significant advantage. Some frontiersmen wove gill nets from plant fibers or animal sinew, stretching them across narrow waterways. During the spring migrations, when fish were abundant, nets provided food sufficient for weeks. Preserving the catch was as vital as securing it. Smoking and drying kept fish edible for many months. Smoking added flavor while low heat removed moisture. Drying, achieved by leaving thin strips in the sun or over a fire, hardened the meat, making it easy to store and transport. Fishing was never reliant on mere chance. Strategy was essential. Frontiersmen observed the water patterns. Fish gathered in slow-moving eddies, concealed themselves behind rocks, and often fed before approaching storms. Knowing the optimal location and timing for casting a line or throwing a spear made the difference between sustenance and hunger. A successful catch meant food for the night. But for those with sufficient bravery, the forest offered something larger and more formidable. Number 7. Bear pursuing bears went beyond obtaining meat. It was about valuable fat, desirable fur, and solidifying one's reputation on the frontier. Successfully taking down a bear signified more than luck. It proved you were capable and dangerous. Bears supplied many pounds of rich meat, a welcome change from leaner venison or dried rabbit. Yet, the fat held even greater value than the meat. Bear grease was highly prized on the frontier, serving as lubrication for firearms, waterproofing for footwear, axle grease for wagons, and even fuel for lamps. Some claimed it could remedy colds, while others simply enjoyed it cooked with cornbread. But be warned, bears were formidable opponents. Black bears were the most frequently encountered. They were large, quick, and powerful. Grizzlies, though less common east of the Rocky Mountains, were legendary, massive creatures with equally volatile tempers. A single blow from a paw could fracture a skull. Hunting them without a well-thought-out plan or a disregard for your life was reckless. Traps were utilized when rifles were unavailable or impractical. A deadfall trap, heavy logs set to fall when bait was disturbed, could break a bear's spine. Pit traps also worked, assuming you had the time and labor to excavate deeply and conceal the opening. Even then, a wounded bear might escape and seek revenge. Most frontiersmen favored a precise rifle shot. One round accurately placed targeting the heart or lungs. However, that initial shot had to be decisive. A bear could sprint up to 30 miles per hour and would not hesitate to charge. Hunters carried large-caliber rifles, which were heavy and slow to reload. If the first shot failed, survival depended on a knife and sheer courage. Bear hides were highly valued. Thick and warm, they made exceptional blankets and coats. Properly tanned, the hide provided excellent protection against wind and snow. Some frontiersmen wore necklaces made from bear claws, not merely decorative, but as a potent reminder to others of the dangerous encounters they had survived. Nothing from the animal was wasted. Tendons became cordage. Bones were fashioned into tools. Even the gallbladder could be traded for goods. Killing a bear was more than hunting. It was engaging in combat with the wild itself. And the individuals brave enough to attempt it, well, they carried themselves with a bit more presence around the campfire after dusk.